Hello and welcome to Blockchain Gaming World with me, John Jordan. So we're going to look at some funding numbers today. So I have a big sort of spreadsheet that I update regularly, and I try to sort of log all the investment into blockchain gaming and metaverse and blockchain game sort of infrastructure and all that sort of stuff. And I'm always sort of going back and looking at it. And I thought it might be a good time to just have a look back over the last couple of years and just look at the biggest funding rounds and sort of look at the companies who got that money and what they did with it. So this is not the full list. This is basically, I've looked at some of the bigger rounds. So I think it took from about $30 million upwards, and just color coded it. So you can see here, this is the stuff in 2021. So quite a lot of deals going through then. 2022, obviously the boom year, even more years, loads and loads of money going in then. 2023, not so much, and 2024 so far. Obviously we're not even. We're getting close to we're over a third of the way through. Only one deal over 30 million at Parallel Studio. So here's a whole bunch of companies that probably you've heard of, and this is the money that they raised, sort of $10 billion worth in total over the last sort of 4 years, 3.5 years, and some sort of other data around it, and so some of the people who are investing into these companies. So that's pretty cool. Let's put it onto a more interesting spreadsheet. So because in this one, there's some companies that have done multiple rounds over the years. So Dapper Labs, Immutable, Sky Mavis, Animoca, they've all raised multiple amounts. So we want to put that into one sheet to get like a sort of combined total, which is in this column here. So I've just ranked this now in terms of larger amounts. So still the same color coding. Actually, it's not the same color coding. Actually, it's not that at all. Forget that color coding. But we can see here at the top. So Forte has raised the most, $910 million in 2 rounds. See some of the investors here. Animoca Brands actually raised almost 800 million itself. Yuga Labs has raised almost 800 million itself from some of these well-known venture companies: A16Z, SoftBank, Kota, Sequoia, Paradigm. These are the names: Forte, Animoca, Yuga Labs, Sorare, Dapper Labs, Polygon, OpenSea, Sky Mavis. OneFootball, which raised $300 million and basically didn't do anything about NFTs and basically stopped doing it all. I don't know if they gave the money back. Immutable, Mythical, Limit Break. So those are the sort of ones I guess we're sort of interested in. And I think there's sort of quite clearly there becomes a trend here, not in every company, but particularly at the very high end. So Forte has raised almost $1 billion in funding. It's a sort of is or was, depending on how you want to see it, a sort of a blockchain gaming platform ecosystem that was going to do wallets and everything, and everyone was going to sort of use it to onboard their games. It wasn't going to be a blockchain, but probably it could have been. It raised enormous sums of money. Did 2 funding rounds, and basically we don't talk about it anymore. And it sort of actually came up last week in a sort of a bit of news. Wasn't sort of directly about Forte, but sort of Forte came up, and it made me sort of think, whatever happened to Forte? And we just don't talk about it anymore. There's like a few games used it. I think still Zynga are still using it for their blockchain game, which we haven't really heard very much about recently, but very little has been heard for something that raised almost $1 billion back in 2021-22. It's sort of quite surprising. Animoca, I guess you could sort of argue, is sort of quite successful, but it invests in lots of other projects, 400 projects sort of famously, but doesn't really have a lot itself. So it has the Mockaverse these days, like tokens going live on that. But equally, if you've raised almost $800 million, would you expect something more from that? I don't know. Well, I guess time will tell, I suppose, with Animoca. It has all these investments in lots of other companies. How well will they do? So we sort of wait to see what that means. Yuga Labs, again, another example, raised a ton of money. This includes venture money and $450 million of venture money, and it raised a whole bunch, hundreds of millions off its NFTs. Obviously, Bored Ape prices are like really low at the moment. The other side, Metaverse, isn't really not worked out. It's not doing some testing still, but not very, very clear. They've had about 3 different CEOs. They've got rid of their games people. It's all a bit sort of confusing. There's sort of Dookie Dash Unclog was supposed to come out, I think, in February or January, and that's gone very quiet. So we don't know what's going on there. I mean, I'm not saying Yuga Labs is a total failure, but it's at $800 million worth of money, so it's not very clear sort of what it's done with it. again, sort of so rare. We've spoken a lot about in 2021 when it raised large amounts of money. It was a sort of, it still is a soccer game where you have all the sort of, you get the NFT cards of the players and put together a team. That was pretty successful back then. It raised 50 million, then another big chunk, 600 and whatever it was, 80 million. And that game is still, people are still playing it. But the other expansions into other sports, basketball, baseball, and stuff like that, just hasn't expanded the market. I don't think those games have been successful, and you could sort of argue with some of these. In fact, I will argue that they raised their money at the point they raised the money. They were successful, very successful, had a lot of growth, which is why they raised the money. And then after that point, they weren't any more successful, even though they raised all this enormous amount of money. Dapper Labs, the people behind Flow, raised $555 million. The Flow blockchain hasn't been, you would say, particularly successful at all, really. I mean, it's got stuff on it, but it's not really a blockchain people talk about. Polygon raised a ton of money for its ecosystem and actually sort of pulled back and is just focusing on the tech. It's still a very successful blockchain from the tech point of view, but it's not doing any sort of ecosystem stuff anymore. OpenSea is probably the obviously a sort of a prime example of raising. At one point was valued at $13 billion, raised $400 million, and since then has sort of seen its market share be sort of say almost destroyed by Blur and Magic Eden and sort of other marketplaces. So people don't talk about OpenSea anymore. Sky Mavis, I guess, is one you'd say, yeah, that's doing okay. Ronin Blockchain is doing really well. They raised $300 million. Got the Pixels game on their blockchain. It's not their game, but this would be the one where you go, yeah, that probably seems like a decent investment. Immutable, you could probably argue the same thing. Doing okay, it seems. Got a bunch of games coming out. Guild Guardian's just out, so that's done okay. Mythical Games, I'd argue, probably maybe not everyone would argue this, but Mythical Games, I think, is probably doing okay. They're going live on Polkadot fairly soon. They've got the NFL Rivals game, which is doing, I think, okay. A whole bunch of other games to sort of come out. So these sort of three here, actually, interestingly, all of them are running their own blockchains or running their own sort of ecosystem platform around blockchains, even if they're not running their own blockchain. But actually, all of them are actually on the. Immutable runs on top of Polygon, so I guess that's the difference there. But they all run their own. They all run their own ecosystem, including sort of blockchain type elements, and have games running on there. I guess for those we'd say it's not quite clear how successful they're going to be. They've not onboarded tens of millions, any of them yet, but at least they're sort of in the game. Whereas I think you say stuff like Yuga Labs, certainly Forte, Dapper Labs, OpenSea, probably hard to see them coming back to where they were. And I guess the final one, sort of Limit Break, which is a games company. It hasn't really done anything. It launched some NFTs, gone very, very quiet, done a whole bunch of interesting sort of tech work in the background, but I guess you'd say for Limit Break, still too early to tell, even though it's been 18 months since they raised their money. So I think it just sort of goes to prove that a lot of money has gone into the ecosystem. They've looked at $10 billion worth, and it's very hard to say any of it has been successful. I guess the VCs would say, well, you have to look at it over a 5-10 year period. Most funds look at stuff over a 10-year period, so we're only looking at it over maybe 2 or 3 years at most. And that's a fair argument, but I think equally, certainly the sort of some of these top ends here, you would say the money has not helped them, I think. And certainly Forte is a really weird example where you have $1 billion of funding, enormous amounts of funding, and even fairly early on, just nothing was very little news came out of Forte. There wasn't any excitement about games that were using it. The few games that were using it that I was tracking then decided not to use it and then moved to other chains or stopped doing blockchain entirely. So a very sort of confused picture there around Forte. I wonder if they had. You'd hope people got their money back, really, because if you raise, I can't think how you would spend $1 billion. So maybe C Capital and people like this, Animoca, got some of their money back, but it's not been announced that they're closing down, as far as I know. So weird, a weird thing, weird situation, I guess we had in 2021-22, where all this money was flying around, not being used in a great way, and keep an eye on it, and maybe come back to this in a year's time and see if any of this stuff has changed. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you again soon.